September 15th, 2021. I'll call the Board of Health meeting to order. And we do have a quorum. Besides me, Daryl Beardsley, there's also Matt Beavers and Matt Vitale are here. And so before, we do have one scheduled variance hearing this evening at 7:30. Number of other items on the agenda, but before we begin, I need to announce any items to be added as not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance of the meeting, and then we can vote to amend the agenda. So we have, well, you can read them. Or do they need to be verbal because we're online, or it's part of the screen?
Yeah, the recording should capture the screen.
Yeah.
Perfect. I move to add the 7 updated agenda items not reasonably anticipated.
And I second that.
Okay, Daryl Beardsley, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, so shall we dive right into then the COVID ones?
Sure. Daryl, are you available at 7 p.m. on September 22nd for a special meeting with the Dover Board of Health?
Yes, and what day that is? The
Wednesday. It's
Next
a Wednesday at
Wednesday.
7.
Okay, yep.
And Ellen, are you available as well?
Yes.
So we can confirm Rebecca's availability. I think the goal for the discussion of this is discussion of mandatory vaccination for faculty and staff at the at DS for a discussion. And I'd like, I'm sure we have lots of other business, but given the kind of discontent that people had last time when we had to get to other business because it was scheduled, I'd like to keep it just as that topic for the joint meeting. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sounds very appropriate.
And Matt, I don't remember that we had any other agenda topics. Like, I think that was it. Does that align with your memory as well?
For the special meeting, that's
Yeah.
that's correct. Like I think we want to keep it focused on the one topic, so there's lots of time for discussion and comment.
And then my other thought is, again, given the nature of the topic, I think that while there have been sometimes that there's been limitations to town residents, I'd favor having it open to comment from any teachers or other district employees who are in attendance. Does that seem reasonable as well?
Yeah, I agree.
Perfect. I'll stop hijacking, Daryl. Do we want to talk about? Yeah, I'll stop hijacking. I'll go on mute. It's my best luck. So I'll let Kay know. Ellen, if you could forward sort of once we have a Zoom, if you could forward that to Kay Peterson, please.
Okay. So Daryl, will you send me the Zoom info? And then I'll make up an agenda and forward it to Kay.
Perfect.
Okay.
And then
All
she,
right.
and then yeah. So I think if you could forward to Kay, then I think she can be responsible for circulating to her, to their kind of administrator, and perfect. Thanks,
Okay.
guys.
All right. So sticking with COVID. Let's
So
see.
I'm happy to briefly review the data which we've circulated as it relates to the town buildings. I think we continue to see sustained uptrend in last week's data. We'll get the next data update tomorrow, but the trend that had kind of motivated us at our last meeting to take those steps is continuing. And since then, Dover has instituted a little bit broader mask mandate, but again, I think the data supports it right now. At least in that last data cycle, we were both above the state average. And at that time, you know, Sherborn was about 80 out of 250 communities or so in terms of the incidence rate, which is really different than we've been at other times. So I'd favor continuing that requirement for the time being.
And just to explicitly state it, we continue to be at a rate above that, which the CDC recommends indoor masking.
Yep. Jeff, I see your hand up. Fire away.
Well, I was just going to add, you guys are the better judge of having one topic with Dover next week. Medfield High just started their pool testing this week. So I don't know where we stand on pool testing.
Perfect. We can jump. We
You don't
can
need
jump
to, you don't need to discuss it tonight. I meant more next week, unless you only wanted to.
in. It falls under our COVID-19 update school reopening topic. So I'm
Okay.
happy to jump to that one if that works.
Well, no, you don't have to jump around.
No,
please,
we're
go
all
ahead.
hopping and popping with the
We're,
COVID.
we're doing all COVID all the time to start with.
We run amok. I got you. Thank you.
So the school reopening has gone fairly, I think, well thus far. There are multiple testing protocols, and there are a couple of updates that we'll probably get over the next week or two. So for pool testing has gone live. At the initial phase, pool testing is being offered at Pine Hill and Chickering, given that the state has recommended against including vaccinated individuals in pool testing. It sounds like I think the process has not gone entirely smoothly, but is making progress towards smoothness. I think that the fact that the district did it last year has been helpful, but are continuing to partner with the vendor. And I think the vendor, there's sort of a third-party vendor who's supporting it via the state. But that, I think they have been very, very busy. So I think that has gone live. I don't think there's an imminent plan to go live at the region. The sort of recommendation we gave to the district is if we're still having growing pains at elementary, let's get that so it feels like it's running pretty smoothly before we consider expanding to the region where we suspect there'll be a much smaller population of unvaccinated individuals. So while it may be important to consider really having a process that's working well and is robust at the elementary first would be a recommendations for prioritization. And again, they're working on that with the CIC as the vendor supporting it. The other testing protocols that are in place are what's called test and stay, which lets kids who are close contacts in a classroom setting remain in school by getting daily antigen testing. They can't participate in extracurriculars unless the school does 7-day-a-week antigen testing, which we're not able to support at this time. So for us, I think we've got a good classroom strategy. We have had some students go into test and stay. I have not heard any issues around that. And then I think kind of overall, have just worked with the district a little bit about communicating questions and concerns as they come up for parents, and sort of how we can best feed that back to the district, and kind of figure out sort of who's laying a given topic as. So I would say kind of overall so far so good. The other part that's really encouraging is that the uptake for testing consent has been dramatically higher this year than last year. So I haven't seen the most recent data, but the consent rates in the like 60, 70, 80% rate as opposed to like 20, 25% rate last year.
Wow, that is huge.
I think it's good agenda setting by the state and the district, which is that there was a uniform consent. So if you wanted, you had to do an opt-out to opt out of pool testing, which they did offer. That was not initially offered, but based on parental request was offered. So that you sort of do one consent and it lets you do test and stay. If your kiddo happens to become symptomatic while at school, they can get tested. And it's also the pool testing consent. So it's one consent for 3 testing pathways. And so I think many people were probably most motivated by test and stay. And I think there was also some good communication this year to really highlight that, especially with test and stay available, even if your kiddo's a close contact, like if they're able to stay and participate in school. And so I think that hopefully mitigating some of the anxiety. So Matt, what am I missing or what would you add? I think I hit the highlights.
I think you did. The only thing I was going to add was the dramatically better uptake this year, which I think is hopefully going to make a big difference. We haven't seen any pooled results yet because it's just starting, but hopefully we'll have those soon. Sounds like everything's working reasonably well. I think just the one highlight on extracurriculars is you dropped the word, but really it's a weekend issue. If there's no weekend testing available, then the people are supposed to quarantine on the weekend. That's the main issue that I think we don't have yet. I think there may be some plans for some home testing, but that's not quite up and running yet.
So speaking of the antigen tests and maybe home testing, what's the word on how reliable those tests are, including the ones that people can get at CVS and whatever?
I think the district has either has modified or plans to modify their protocol. I think one issue that came up was families describing very long symptomatic periods prior to PCR, which is not always typical for, kind of what we've historically observed for people getting testing for strep or other things. And it just raises a concern about, are we, kind of looking back and like, oh, I guess I had a tickle a week ago. Like, we really want to make sure that anybody who might be in a symptomatic period is out. So for the school, what we've said is you need to have a PCR test is going to be your time zero. I would encourage you to get that early in the process. I think for the antigen tests, I haven't heard that Delta makes them any better or worse. I think that they still have testing limitations. The data, I think, supports that is offset by high frequency testing. And it tends to have less sensitivity at lower viral loads. I think Delta's pattern, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Delta's had a high viral load pattern in general early. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, that sounds right. And I think that's contributing in somewhat to the current feeling is that at this moment in time, the Binax Now, which is what the school's using, which is an antigen test, is pretty darn close to the PCR in terms of test characteristics and performance. The important thing to note is that all depends on the environment in which you're doing the test, right? And so that's in the current situation with Delta. It's with the current sort of community prevalence and pretest probability. We're performing well. If Delta goes away, which we all hope, and we end up with sort of a lower viral load virus and less community prevalence, then the performance of the test may not be as good in that situation. But at the moment, it seems like they're working better than I think we initially hoped, and certainly seem reasonable for what we're using them for at the school.
Okay, great.
And then I think that the last piece is the district is working to pull together vaccine data in terms of uptake of faculty, staff, students. That is an ongoing effort. And I think that they'll have data that they'll probably be the primary people to share. I think my preliminary impressions are very robust staff uptake, but I think that'll come from the district, and we haven't heard final numbers yet, but I think that'll be discussed at future school committee meeting. So my overall take for school is like, I'm really glad we're doing all the things we're doing. I think that in general, the pediatrics data supports that the Delta surge is really impacting kids at a higher rate than before. I don't know that that means it's specifically targeting kids, but they're a larger percentage of the unvaccinated universe. And so it's not surprising that they make it a larger proportion of the total infected population. But I'm really encouraged at the strategies that the school has maintained around ventilation. And I think that the masking strategy we put in place has been prudent. We'll kind of continue to get a lot more insights across the country and locally as we figure out what next steps make the most sense. But I think encouraging so far.
Okay. So on the school issues and the data review, anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's it. I think that the discussion on the 22nd will be helpful. And then I think there'll also be a couple of school committee meetings talking some of these topics. And, we continue to work closely with the district when questions come up to kind of help troubleshoot.
All right, then I'll go to under the things that we added, the number 4, request for COVID guidance from the community center. So we got a call from the new head of the volunteer head of the community center. And he was basically asking what the Board of Health rules were regarding use of that space. So we had a conversation, and that they're interested in implementing things that will make it safer. I did indicate that right now the state doesn't have any rules around use of such spaces, and we don't have anything specific, but we talked about general guidelines, such as mask wearing, and would there be staff there? And then how would the community center want to handle its own staff versus if people are bringing in caterers or others?
One other suggestion I would have, again, I think those precautions are helpful. I know one thing that we've seen at the district is when we have had cases having, I think there's some of the things we had in place last year that made contact tracing easier. And so I think one of the pieces, to the degree possible, if the community center is able to encourage organizers to track attendance, so that if there is a case and we're trying to figure out, hey, who else is at risk there, that can be done efficiently, whether it's by the state group doing contact tracing or by the public health nurse. I think that's one of the, I don't know that it's a requirement, but I think it would be a best practice to communicate, to just say, to the degree feasible, being able to make sure you have contact information for attendees and that you have some general sense of who's in attendance would be a best practice. But I get that if you have a large group gathering, you may not have that. So I don't think it's a requirement.
Yes, so there are a couple of things. So we talked about a number of issues surrounding what could be done. He was unable to attend this evening, but will let us know if there's another meeting that would be good for him to attend, and then he'll come with any more questions. But they are trying to follow things closely and to encourage people to wear masks during their events, but they're certainly getting a range of folks coming to have birthday parties there and other things that it's not clear that everyone wants to wear masks indoors, and they plan to have food. So it will be a range of things potentially. And of course, then the other message is that we always have to plan for a possibility of a shift in protocols based on what the conditions are.
Yeah.
So.
And Daryl, I think I understand it right, but from a governance standpoint, the community center, while often used by many community groups, is independent of the town. It's not a town extension. It's its own charitable organization or nonprofit, I mean.
Yes, he did mention that it's not a town building in the same way that town hall is.
Okay. And so like the library portion of the community center, while being used by the library, would kind of fall under municipal space, but the common space that's rented out wouldn't.
Yes.
Okay. And I see Tom's hand up.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yes, Tom Trainer here. Thank you. Yeah, I wonder if I could provide some extra color here, because I'm on the board of the Community Center Foundation, and just to clarify, the Community Center building is owned by the town of Sherborn, but it's leased to the private nonprofit Community Center Foundation for $1 a year. And we manage the building. We take care of all repairs. And as many of you may or may not know, the building was renovated almost 40 years ago by the then new foundation. So it's of course half the building right now. We have the library downstairs, but we are getting more requests for both private events, as Daryl mentioned, birthday parties, bar mitzvahs, memorial services after funerals, and we're just looking for more guidance with this whole COVID situation. And we're also getting requests from more community groups, the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Council on Aging, that we provide space for also.
Okay,
Hope that was helpful.
yes, thank you. That cleared it up. You didn't quite go into the explanation of the ownership and the leasing arrangement.
One other thing, Daryl, I want to add. I assume you were speaking with Ernie.
Yes.
Yeah, Ernie is the building manager. It is a paid position.
Oh.
The board is volunteer, but he's the one paid position.
Okay.
part-time.
So I'll offer, the board's done this before. If you want our support, we're always happy to give it. If you want us to issue some kind of rules that, you know, assuming the board can all agree on what they are and they're in line with what you would like to see. For example, Ernie and I just talked about, again, if you had staff there, he said that there would be a requirement that any staff provided somehow through the community center would be required to wear masks. But of course, masking is always better on the infectious person to protect others, and that is more effective than the mask protecting you from the virus. So, you know, that's just a detail about how to approach it and how to manage it. And again, depending on what works for you folks and what you'd like to see there, but I understand there's also the need to have the revenue generation as well. So
it sounds like sort of what we would be offering is subject matter expertise. It's like, hey, if we can be helpful around it. Does that sound right, Daryl?
yes.
In terms of like, hey, this is what we're thinking about it. I mean, I think the general principles are all pretty steady. I think the biggest pieces are maximizing ventilation to the degree possible with comfortable use of the space. Indoor masking, I think, is important and would be strongly recommended. Again, I think it's hard to adjudicate, you know, for a sort of person who's rented the space. I don't know that I'd be excited to say, hey, there's an independent requirement on this because you happen to be using this space. Whereas if you rented Silverwood Farm, you wouldn't have the same requirement, you know, because I think that it's hard to kind of say, hey, we really want to rent the space. And then because you're renting it in town hall or in the community center, we've got an added set of requirements that isn't on other alternative spaces in town. Like I wouldn't want to put the community center at a structural disadvantage if we have requirements that only apply to it.
No, I was thinking more of if, and people have asked us this in the past, or to provide something that says the Board of Health recommends X.
Yeah,
That's in line with what they want to do anyway. And I have to say, he mentioned some creative things that have been done already there of having food served outdoors, like during a break of a play or something like that, or setting up tents outdoors that people could go for.
I think
mingling.
recommendation sounds really comfortable to me.
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
And I would
So-
agree if you'd like to send us something written that would certainly be helpful. And I think Ernie's been trying to follow the lead also from whatever guidance you're giving to the library, because he's in frequent contact with the library staff right there in the building.
Yeah. I think it, as he mentioned, because the events are so different, that it might be helpful to talk about them as they come up or as a new type of event is encountered. So be happy to do that and see, because there are no simple answers, unfortunately.
And maybe in keeping with that, do we want to tackle the COA request?
Yes, so that one is similar. They're going to be having in-person gatherings for these classes that I would assume are going to be primarily senior citizens. They're planning on having some spacing, like not a very densely packed class. And Ellen, I'm forgetting what the other provision was.
She said,
I think masked and spacing.
we're limiting the registration to 20 participants, all required to wear masks, and they will be well spaced out.
I think that sounds reasonable. My only other thought is, you know, again, to make sure that they explicitly track both who signs up and who attends in case contact tracing is necessary.
Mhm.
I mean, all this stuff makes me anxious just in general, but I think it's reasonable and consistent with what people are doing in lots of other settings. And so for me, I think it's, what they propose seem generally reasonable on the face of it, although kind of all in-person things right now make me a little bit nervous, but I don't think, like, this doesn't look reckless to me. It seems like a reasonable approach. It's just where, in a period with a real uptick.
Yes. Okay, let's see. And the joint meeting, flu clinic is not simple.
And I guess, Daryl, do we want to just briefly discuss the next door post? I mean, I think, for the purpose of the record, Board of Health never provided guidance on a memorial service. Board of Health, I don't think, was approached about a memorial. And so
No, in fact, until the next door posting appeared, we had heard absolutely nothing about an event.
And so, I think it's one where, like, it's not true information and then it just kind of runs along. But, like, for the purposes of the record, we never expressed or were approached for guidance on the topic, and the assertions that were the premise of the post and discussion were inaccurate.
All right. So is there anyone who signed on this evening who had any questions or comments regarding that topic? I think other officials in town mentioned that they really hadn't had requests from people in town for an event. So that was part of the issue. Okay. All right, 2 minutes.
You want to tackle the VNA invoice to wrap up COVID?
Oh, that's a good one. Yes. Does anyone need to see it? Have you both seen it?
I've seen it. Looks
It
fine.
had a modest number of hours, 15 or something like that. Okay, so do we have a motion to approve payment of the August invoice for the VNA?
So moved.
Seconded.
Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Matai, aye. I guess one question I have is, as we see the rise in case counts, it certainly seems plausible we'll see the VNA exceed our historically budgeted amount. I know that David had reached out in the summer about various funds expiring, but I don't see that we're in a position to not do contact, right? Like, we still need to do the same contact tracing and everything else, and we may have a variance there. Is that accurate?
Yes, and we can also talk about this with these ARPA funds because they are very specifically for public health services.
Okay.
So,
Let's talk
or
about that one.
public health issues. Can't say it's all services, but issues. So, okay, tell you what, it's 7:29, so I'm not going to open the meeting yet. First, I'll say, do we have the green cards, Ellen, for the
Yes.
variance hearing at 148 South Main? Did you say yes?
Oh, yes. Can you hear me?
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to still not open it. We have probably a half a minute. I will open up the file for that.
And Glenn and Elaine, is it accurate to say you're both here for the agent's business once we finish the hearing?
Yes,
Perfect.
Glenn and I are both here for that. Thank you.
Perfect.
Oh, sorry, let me back out and get the locus map. Okay, and Dan, I believe I saw you.
Yes,
Log in.
Dan McIntyre representing the homeowners.
Excellent, so everyone can see where the location is.
Yeah, so this site is located right at kind of that little turnoff heading down toward Woodland.
Mhm.
The house was constructed back in the 1960s. It appears to be the original septic system that has just gone into complete failure. and they're in need of a new septic system. This is a fairly constrained lot. We have little room to work with. We've got the well in the backyard, we've got the wetlands in the backyard, and a very high groundwater table all throughout the lot. So the
And then-
existing system is in the front yard. So we're proposing to maximize the new leaching facility in the front yard as well, to try to get as much capacity as we can out of this small area. So it is an existing 4-bedroom house. It's remaining 4 bedrooms. We're not asking for any additional room counts here. So as I said, it's a high groundwater table. We're proposing to use an Elgin innovative alternative system to allow for a 2-foot offset to groundwater to keep the mounding to a minimum, so we don't cause grading issues above the clapboards, and also to try to keep the grading within the property lines. It will involve a pump. We really can't raise the plumbing high enough to make it gravity, so we've got a new septic tank, new pump tank, and we're pumping up 2 Elgin leaching trenches.
Okay.
Because of the site constraints, we are asking for a few variances to the Sherborn regulations, as well as Title V local upgrade waivers on the groundwater.
Okay. Does anyone have questions? It does look remarkably constrained.
Yeah,
And
this
really,
looks
the
like,
only other spot would be here, but that doesn't seem to have advantages over this location, as best I could tell.
Yeah, we were looking at that, but then we're within the 100-foot buffer zone, so we're closer to the wetlands on that one.
Mhm. Yeah.
and Dan, I'm just trying to, I mean, I totally echo Daryl's, it's a really complicated plan. I'm just trying to orient a little bit where the driveway is. It looks like there's a wall between the driveway and the system.
There is, the driveway comes down and it's a drive under garage
Okay,
on the side.
okay. Perfect.
So the area that Daryl just mentioned, it's lower than the front yard. So, and when we were out there, it was groundwater almost at the surface, so it was pretty squishy down there.
Okay,
Whereas the front yard was already filled in.
yeah, it doesn't, I don't see any alternative. That is a tough lot.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And Mark, any particular comments you'd like to add?
Well, I think the statement was just made. It is a very constrained lot. Unfortunately, there will be some additional cost to remove the old system, which is going to be pretty much within reason, within the same location of the new soil absorption area. So that's going to require it to be, it's going to be removed by requirements. And that will obviously cost more for the homeowner. But as Dan said, there's really very limited areas out here. So they'll have to remove the old system. Hopefully it's not too deep, and fill it in with sewer gravel or C33, depending on the level of it, which is another type of sewer gravel.
Okay, and are there any abutters or anyone else who has questions about this? Because we are doing a little bit of an abbreviated discussion, because we see these kinds of issues about once you meet all the setback requirements and other site constraints, it gets very difficult to find a spot. And then thus the need for variances. Okay. So if that's okay with everyone, we'll move on to voting on the variance requests. So do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 8.01?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, I'd just like to remind everyone, you can either, if new questions come up before we vote, do let us know, or if you need an explanation of this beyond what's written there on the page. Okay, so Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay. I'll note that the 3 feet provided here using the IA, it could go as little as 2 feet, so. Okay,
Well, in these particular soils, the percolation rate was less than 2 minutes, so 3 feet is
Oh.
minimum.
Oh, all right. Thank you. I was kind of wondering about that. All right. Okay, section 8.02, do we have a motion to grant a variance to that
So moved.
section?
Seconded.
Any other comments? Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Oh, Matt Vitale, aye. No Lisa Camp, no Rebecca Honeywell. Got it.
Okay. And do we have a motion to grant a variance to sections 10.1B and C?
I was gonna say, it looks like Ellen's giving him a better grade. So moved.
Seconded.
Any other comments? Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
And again, an advantage here is we like to have these kinds of variances be to the on-site well. Let's see, do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 10.2?
So moved.
Seconded.
Comments? Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
And do we have a motion to grant a variance to another part of section 10.2 regarding the property line offset?
So moved.
Seconded.
Comments? Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, and for the Title V local upgrade waiver, do we have a motion to grant a variance to 15.4051H?
So moved.
Seconded.
Comments? Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, just want to show the rationale for anyone who's watching. And I will close the hearing and mark are the plans ready for approval.
Yes, they are, Daryl. Conditional to deed recordings, both for the garbage grinder, prohibition, and the innovative alternative system that's being put in use, the Elgins, as Dan described.
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the plan with those 2 conditions?
So moved.
Second.
Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay. So any other comments or questions from anyone on this? Especially you, Dan?
No, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And I know the homeowners appreciate it. They have a contractor lined up to try to get this in fairly quickly because they've been restricted on water use and been going to the laundromat and
Oh.
trying to keep this in check.
Mhm.
Dan, what I would suggest is just make sure they know about the deed recordings, since we can't release the plans until those are
Right.
completed. So maybe have them, push that quickly, and then we can do the pre-construction after that's completed.
Okay, will do. Thanks.
And we'll hope for just a teeny bit of dry weather sometime.
Dan, I can actually email them tonight if you'd prefer, rather than getting them in the mail.
Oh, that'd be great. And then I can get them right over to the Bennetts.
Yep, okay, I'll do that.
Thank you.
All right, Dan, have a good night.
You too.
Maybe we can tackle 160 Nason Hill, as that looks like the attendees we've got for agents business.
Yes, I believe so. I know Glenn's here, and I believe there's another family member here.
I
for the
saw
estate.
Elaine also on the
Yes.
sign in.
Yep, so we have both family members here, and the plans are available, I believe. Darryl, you have them if you want.
So 160 Nason?
Yeah, that's the one that's actually has the house on it. I would suggest we start with that one first, because it also has a well on it. And they're planning the well is interfering with the septic system location being proposed. So there'll be some conditions prior to starting of the septic system.
Mhm.
And Mark, I just want to make sure I'm oriented right. Is this the like the sort of mini subdivision, like the 2 house
Yes,
subdivision
Matt.
we talked about
You
before?
saw this back in, I think it was February, but I'm not for
Okay.
sure. But that is indeed you're correct, that this is that mini subdivision.
Okay,
Okay,
And you'll see the cul-de-sac that's being created for this mini subdivision on lot one. It's to the upper left, right. And the driveway presently to the existing house is coming in to the bottom right.
oh, over here, okay.
And the existing well, let me, my plan is near there, and they're proposing a well. The well's too close to the proposed septic. So it's okay, because it's gonna be abandoned. And I have reviewed this with the engineer. We're on our first revision. There were a couple things that had to be done. But one of the most important things was to have the engineer confirm that there are no other septic systems within the required distances of the proposed well. So we're looking at both a proposed well and a proposed septic system. And the existing well is, let's see, right, well, they made a note to be abandoned, but it's to the bottom corner of the house. Yeah, oh, Darryl, you're right on. I'm looking at the paper plan. You're already ahead of me. And the proposed well is further out towards the wetlands, but not in the wetlands. Exactly. The plan is up to the requirements. Conditional, they're going to be required to do a deed recording for the garbage grinder as allowed. It's allowed for new construction as well. And on this plan, it should be noted in the vote, if the board so wishes to vote approval, that the septic system is not to be constructed until the well is abandoned, the existing well, and the proposed well is drilled to prove potable water. That would be my suggestion for the vote to approve this plan.
Okay, any other comments or questions from the board on this?
and so it seems like, Mark, this is really just the sequencing of boom, boom, boom in terms of.
Yeah, we actually did this on a repair just recently on 21 Prospect.
Okay.
But it's good to make it clear at the time of the vote so that there's no confusion, because at times, there's some confusion. So that would be standard, normal to do, and it's always noted in the vote so that there's no confusion on it.
Perfect. Thanks, Mark.
And I'll also note that housing code requires that one of the most important first steps for a dwelling is proof that there's an adequate and proper quality water supply. So hence the reason it's more important to get the well straightened out first before moving on to the septic.
Yeah, and in most cases on new construction, well, in all cases, they drill the well for that potability, because I can't issue the building permit until potability is proven, both quality and quantity of the water. But typically on new construction, we don't see an existing well. In this case, we do. So that's going to be that condition for the septic system not to be installed until the well is abandoned properly by a well driller.
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the plan conditional to the sequencing that Mark has laid out?
And also the deed recording for the garbage grinder.
Oh, thank you.
And, can I just check in, Glenn and Elaine, any concerns with anything that's been outlined or discussed, or does that all sound fine to you guys?
It sounds good to me. And Glenn, I think, has his finger, has his thumb up.
We got a thumb
Yeah,
up,
thumbs
I'll
up.
take it. That's not usually the finger we get at Board of Health, so we'll take it.
We just have trouble finding the mute button.
Perfect, sounds great. All right, sorry to interrupt, Daryl.
No, that was pretty much it, just asking for a motion.
Oh, so moved?
And seconded.
Any other comments? Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye. Have a great night, guys.
Okay,
So we have one more to go. I think. they
Yes,
probably
lot
want
two.
me-
Oh, we're talking
Yes,
about lot
lot
two.
two. And, they're still here, good. So for lot two, same owners. And in this case, this is a lot without any home on any house. It's open land that abuts the house lot, 160 Nason Hill. And so in this case, I'm going to recommend approval, and just note that the well is also a part of this plan, and there's no additional wells. So I'd recommend approval of the well and septic with the deed recording for the garbage grinder.
Okay, any questions or comments from the board?
I may be missing it, but just to confirm, there's no abutting wells that are within a distance. It's problematic for the proposed septic, correct?
That, Matt, that is correct. In fact, they
Perfect. I see it.
put a statement on the plan. There's no other wells
Perfect.
within 200 feet of the septic, but I had to have them add, and they had to add another statement that there are no septic systems within the required distances of the proposed well, which they have on page 2. So they
Perfect.
have noted both notes on the plan.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
It's right in
Yeah,
there. That is
here,
correct.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and then on page 2, you'll see the note about the well, that there are no septic systems
Yep.
within the required distances on page 2.
It turns out I just need to look over the top of my glasses. Sounds good.
Okay.
All right, and homeowners, any comments or abutters, anyone? Okay,
Comments?
all right. I can't remember, did we have a motion already? Or how about, can we have a motion to approve the plan subject to receipt of the deed recording?
So moved.
And seconded.
Any other comments? Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Battaglia, aye.
Okay,
And I will, on this one, I will send the garbage grinder deed recordings by email to Elaine tonight after the meeting.
Thank you.
okay.
Sounds good.
And on behalf of Glenn and I, thank you very much for the approval. We appreciate it.
Sounds good. You
You're
guys have a great
welcome.
day now.
You too. Thank you.
All right, do we have anyone else here for any other of the topics that would affect which order we take them in? Or that special things anyone's interested in? Okay, I guess we will march through. How about we do 176 Western Ave?
Board voted on the property back on, I believe it was May 19th or June 2nd. I don't have the minutes right in front of me, but
My
May
email is
19th. Thank you, Ellen. And it's appropriate, you have the minutes, and 2 of the conditions, out of the 3 conditions, 1 has definitely been met. They raised this is the property that had to raise their well casing, as well as they had to go forward and do 2 other points. 1 was to get us a plan showing the well in respect to the house, and the other one was to build a well apron. But at this point, the process to put the well casing at a greater height caused for a large hole to be dug around the well, which is now being protected by a tarp. The homeowner built, and I thought he might be here tonight, he built a almost like a tarp with the wood structure to protect that well from any water going into it through that major hole they had to dig. His issue is that he prefers to do the well apron when he can get the excavator out there. And I did observe it. It's a very large hole. And that way he can bring in the materials to set up the well apron, make the ground, reestablish it to be level, and then build the well apron 2 feet out from the casing towards the well casing. With that said, I don't see a problem with that. And as I told him today, I talked to him, I told him about the meeting, but he also said he would get me the plan. So that's something, if he has the plan in, you can make the vote according to that. I would ask that the board allow 1 second, if the board will bear with me. He did submit it today.
He submitted the plan, Mark, but it's the same building plan.
Yeah, see, I don't know if he understands he needs to put the well on the plan. And I asked him that today. He said it's definitely there and I don't see it. So I'm going to have to, but if the board, I can't issue the building permit until at least that's done. And then if the board so wishes to make the well apron conditional to the prior to occupancy of the house, the new addition, that would be fine. Because he wants to do it at the time of the construction.
So I see the well on the plan.
You do, okay, I just opened it up and couldn't find it. Okay,
So page 4 of that document.
let me pull it open. Thank you, Matt. Sometimes it's good to have a few eyes visiting.
Oh, I had to blow it way up.
Oh, okay. Let's see, page 4.
Yeah, page 4 of the document, there's the foundation plan proposed in the lower left corner. They note the well with the distance marked from the house and from the proposed foundation.
Do you want to share screen?
Yeah, I can do that.
And I'll try to find it while you're doing. Thank you, Matt, for bringing that up. That'll save us one extra step.
Should be on the Google Docs. Yeah.
So right, you guys see where I'm circling right here? Can you see my cursor?
Yep.
Oh, yes, yeah, okay, thank you.
No problem.
So what I would say is I kind of missed it, and sorry, I don't know why I downloaded Google Docs. I don't know why I'm missing that, but maybe I did it too early. I didn't see whether the measurements to the well and to the new part are making sure that the non-conformance is no greater to the new addition than it is to the existing, or no
I think, Daryl, I think
smaller a distance.
I think that's reflected. So the existing structure in that one is labeled and looks like it's 5 feet 6 inches, although it's a little bit hard for me to read the font. And then the new structure also has that distance marker with 5'6". So I think it's an identical offset.
Oh, okay. All right, and are those plans, well, Mark, you need time to go over it carefully, and are
Sure.
they submitted by the proper plan preparer?
Yeah, we don't, in the well regulations, we really don't state who's required to submit well plans.
Oh,
I
okay.
always recommend an engineer, a Title V inspector, or a well driller. But we don't really state in our regulations it has to be any of those, but that's always been my recommendation to anyone submitting a well
Mhm.
application.
Okay, so,
More importantly, if it's a new well, I require them to put those definitive statements and to sign it and to stamp it, and they take the liability. So in case they were too close to an abutter, but that's not the case in this situation.
okay. So maybe there would be a step where that measurement would be confirmed as they're starting to put in the foundation or something, just,
Sure, yeah, I
Just to
couldn't
make
get under
sure.
there. The top was only about 1.5 feet off. I had to get down to the ground with a flashlight to see the well casing. But I could confirm that once he removes that structure he built with the tarp on it.
okay. So as long as they understand that there will be another check
Yes,
early on enough so that they don't have the whole structure up and then
I can make that
looking
as a,
at it.
yeah, I can make that as a condition in the building application. For our approval, I'll put that as a condition.
Okay. So are we approving something conditional to one, that you have time to thoroughly review this plan that's come in and don't find any issues? And 2, that so we need a gate, you said prior to occupancy. Is there another point, we used to do for certain types of things up to rough
Yeah, I would
electrical and
say-
plumbing kind of
Yeah,
thing?
maybe that the well apron has to be in at the point when the foundation work is completed. Maybe I could do that as a condition. Because that's what he said, he has the equipment coming in to do the foundation, so I could
Mhm.
maybe make that as the checkpoint to make sure it's completed.
Okay, and then the only question would be if there's some other aspect of the construction that we're not aware of,
Yes,
whether that would be too constraining or not. It's too bad he's not here, because then we could
I was hoping he would be, but
find out what he thinks about that.
Yeah.
Do other folks have thoughts on this? Or maybe just occupancy is sufficient?
I think, I mean, what I would say is I think the whole issue, like for the homeowner, all the things he's doing right now, were not like with things he was sort of like, I want to make my well better and safer. And so my recollection is that these are sort of things that we were supportive of and we said, hey, you really need to do. But, you know, kind of ultimately we said that because it's no less conforming than the baseline structure, it seemed reasonable. So for me, it seems like a really motivated homeowner. And so I think he really wanted clear guidance, but I don't know that we have to make it, like, I think that we can kind of say, hey, occupancy of this makes sense. And he's really just saying, can I tweak the sequencing to make sure I just bring big equipment in once? And that seems reasonable.
Right,
That's
I
okay.
understand what you're saying about, right, he is a motivated homeowner who is interested in having it improved. At least that's the sense that we get. I don't know.
We have to be
I had to say
consistent.
absolutely, do I want to make precedent based on what we believe someone's intent is?
But I think what I would say is I totally don't, because you have to treat lovely people and obnoxious people the same in this role. But I think, so no, I think for me, it's a question of like occupancy feels like a pretty typical gatekeeping function for us. And so that part seemed consistent. If there's another function that's like, he's basically saying, when I do the foundation for this is when we'll do the well apron. And so it seems like if we said, you know, this is like, I don't know if this is one where we say before rough wiring or before whatever. It certainly should be before that, since he's saying he wants it at the foundation, which would need to be before all of that other work.
Right.
I'd say before the concrete foundation is completed, he could, because he'll have the equipment out there at that time.
Yeah.
Or after the concrete foundation is
Yes.
complete. I don't know, something like, because I think part of his concern was damage to it by any equipment and moving of materials, heavy movements.
Okay.
So I don't want it to be too constraining, but occupancy, I think we've got enough examples in town of occupancy that, you know, people didn't get it, but they did occupy.
A building application for a house that's already occupied, so no occupancy permit is issued after the work that he's doing.
Yeah, so
Just the
that's right.
certificate.
That's where
Yeah.
it gets tricky. So, and I think what we've done in the past are that the rough electrical kind of a gate.
That might make sense here, because rough electrical would have to be after foundation.
Yeah, after foundation, a little bit more has been done, so hopefully there's less chance of moving heavy equipment. Maybe we try that out, and then if it needs to be adjusted, he can come back and talk to us about why, and we could see if we can find another gate that's not too far off. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, it seems reasonable.
Okay. So, does anyone want to craft that motion? No. So do we have a motion to grant approval to the for Mark? Do we have another grant? Do we want to authorize Mark to approve the plan following his detailed review of it and its adequacy, and conditional to the well apron being completed by the time of the rough electrical going in?
I think that covered it. I would move that.
Second,
Okay, Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Bataille, aye.
Okay. All right. So Mark, let us know how that goes
Yes, I will.
upon your review.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, Ellen, flu clinic update. This is not a simple discussion.
You want to do the easy stuff first, the food establishments and the,
Well, okay, if you'd like to, I thought you might want to tackle this while we're all fresher, but, or have a little break with the food permits.
whatever you want, if you want.
All
to
right.
do-
Yeah, let's do all right, let's take some easy ones for a bit. So we have a permit renewal for Pilgrim Church. And does this have the recommendation of the food inspector?
Yes, and actually this came up because he conducted his inspection and then we realized that they never submitted their renewal application.
Yes, now I remember, right. So this is for this year.
Yes.
This is the
So
permit
he-
for this year.
He did contact them, they submitted it will require a sodium posting. The sodium was 236. But he did recommend approval.
Okay, and that sodium posting is not out of line with what some of the places in that area have had in the past as well. So they're catching up. So do we have a motion to renew their permit?
So moved.
Seconded.
Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, and has everyone looked, do we want to look at each of the food establishment inspection reports? I can open them up. I just wanted to make sure you want to see them.
I'm not super attached. I mean, I'm happy to have them on the screen. I read through them and feel pretty comfortable with them.
Yeah, I
Okay.
agree. I've looked at them all.
Okay. And so Tom was going to be here to discuss them. I will say that there have been a number of issues at the locations: Dunkin' Donuts, Rustic Pizza, Sherborn Fuel and Market. And he's been working with folks and they have been responsive, but not everything has been resolved yet. Is that a reasonable summation, Ellen?
Yeah,
Albeit very short.
yeah. He was the most concerned with the cleanliness at Rustic Pizza.
Mhm.
He will need to be re-inspecting them again. And he said they were the same violations that he cited them for before.
Mhm. Yeah. So there have been communications going back and forth between the food inspector and these locations. So he is being diligent about it. Okay. Let's see. Minutes for approval. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of May 19th, 2021 as
Amended.
minimally edited by the members?
Yep. Ellen, I emailed, I think, one minor edit, but that's all I had.
Yeah,
And I didn't have comments, so I would move to approve them.
And I'll second. Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
And do we have a similar motion for the minutes of June 2nd, 2021 with the edits as submitted by members?
So moved.
So moved.
Second?
Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, agenda items. I don't know if I want it on the next, depending on what our workload is, the next meeting or some future meeting. I would like to revisit the idea of sort of an out of sequence approval of plans as we did at our last meeting. That particular plan did go on. We were told that there was only an endorsement that was needed. There was also a variance that was needed for that. And I think it might just be a bit of a slippery slope or make the whole process a little more confusing when there's approvals on one and partial approvals on another, and the ordinary sequence would have been to get all of planning board straightened out first, what have you. So I would like to revisit that and make sure that
Sure.
we know what's happening. And also, we didn't have enough information to know that there was a variance request as well, besides the endorsement of the plot, which may or may not have any bearing on what we decided, but I just question whether it was important to approve it ahead of time. So, all right, so if that's okay at some point.
I mean, let's put it on the agenda, and then if we end up finding that we have a rich agenda and don't have time, we can push it back.
Slide it, right, because it's not urgent at the moment, but just something for consideration. And frankly, just because we did it once doesn't mean we have to necessarily follow that path again. So, all right.
I do.
Any other? I'm sorry, I missed that. What'd you say?
Want to do the flu clinic update now?
Sure. Take it away, Ellen.
I am very stressed out. This year, the state is requiring, well, it's not the state so much, in order to get reimbursed for the administration of the flu vaccine and reimbursed for the flu vaccine we purchase. The Commonwealth Medicine is requiring that we use the color platform that the state bought for use to sign up for COVID clinics. So it would be wonderful because it's online registration, and once the clinic is over, the data gets sent directly to MIIS, and it also gets sent directly to Commonwealth Medicine. However, the training that's involved is a lot, and any volunteers that work at the clinic need to have laptops or tablets, and they also need to be trained and have accounts in color, which we don't have. And it's more geared toward towns that have staff, nursing staff that run the clinics. And so
this seems like a heavy short cycle lift.
it's horrible. Right now, I have vaccine in the refrigerator in the office, and I have done nothing to prepare for a clinic, which normally is mid to late October.
And we would have to get, like, would these need to be town resources in terms of computers and laptops and tablets?
Yeah, and the fact that we only do one, maybe two flu clinics a year, and to have volunteers get accounts on color, get trained on color, have the, let them use, it's way too much.
Could we contract with Walpole VNA to do flu clinic or another third party vendor?
I called Alyssa today, but it's actually Yom Kippur, so she wasn't available to talk. But what I did do is I sent an email to Commonwealth Medicine, to the person who's in charge of the vaccine reimbursement program, and just asked, can I please just do it by paper one more year? And then we can worry in January, February, March, when it's slower, about getting the training, getting the necessary requirements, because I'm sure we could buy them even with ARPA funds if we had to. But there's no way that I'm can't even learn it because I'm trying to do the minutes.
Yeah. Well,
So-
and I also think like, when did they put this requirement in place?
Oh, this was recently. It's like within the past,
And it
I
seems,
took the training at Commonwealth Medicine on August 24th. So
yeah. So
that's-
I think, you know, my sort of initial impression is like, if we can outsource to a third party, I'd be enthusiastic about doing that, because I think there's other things like my recollection is that in general, one of the reasons to do the flu clinic is to prepare us for a pandemic.
right.
And so I feel like so well prepared right now. And so again, like, I think we've got a good baseline rationale, but if we say that like we're taking Ellen away from either regulatorily required things like minutes or other acute pandemic response to do a flu clinic, and kind of operationally, even if you said, boy, that's going to be my principal focus, coordinating with our volunteers, getting hardware for them seems impossible.
That's exactly how I feel. It's
Yes, and
overwhelming.
so we could shift. So the issue becomes, if we don't, right now, the rules are, if you do not use this color software platform, you will not get reimbursed for the vaccine that's been purchased by the town. So I think we have $4,000, Ellen, that's been spent. And maybe that's just what we end up spending. And it's unclear what would happen if we had a third party. They might use our stuff, but they would get reimbursed for their time. We just don't know. And
So we could run the flu clinic and administer the vaccine. We just wouldn't be reimbursed, but we wouldn't be breaking a rule with the state. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Okay.
So I mean,
Can I ask you a question?
Oh, hi, Rebecca. Welcome.
Hi. Hi, I just called in. I'm catching your conversation halfway through, so I apologize. So if we were to outsource this, where would the funds come from?
we don't know, because we don't know what those other entities might require.
And so
Okay.
it seems
So
like
are
we
we
could,
just inquiring? So we're just going to inquire to find out what our options are? Is that what you're saying? Or are we making a decision today?
or I could just put together the flu clinic as a drive-in flu clinic at the highway garage like we did last year, do it by paper. It's still a lot of work, but at least we know what we're doing and we
Yeah.
know we'll do it right. Get it done this year, and then we have next year to plan.
I think that makes a ton of sense. Like, we've got stuff. Yeah. Does that sound right to you, Matt?
Yeah, and it's we've got $4,000 of sunk cost, right? So like we may as well give people flu shots with that $4,000, and it's not clear to me that outsourcing it would save us that much money.
No, well,
Right? 'Cause
Yeah.
you get to
usually
pay
we
to
get,
outsource it,
I'm
but don't you get
happy-
reimbursed for the vaccine?
Yeah, I'm happy to help, but that doesn't relieve the administrative burden of our staff. But if we've already purchased it and we won't get reimbursed, I'm totally happy to help. That helps in any way.
Thanks, Rebecca. So, Alan, it sounds like the guidance, I mean, I think collectively, we've got a bunch of other stuff we have to do, and the state changed the rules at us like 6 weeks before we need to implement, which may work fine if you're Framingham, but maybe really tough if you're Ellen.
Yeah.
And so what I would say is, I think it makes sense to figure out whether Walpole VNA has some set where like, oh, this would be like $1,000, and we've got $4,000 in sunk costs, but we could do it at $50 an hour, and we need 20 hours of people, 2 people for 10 hours or whatever, and they're already going to be trained in color anyway, so the lift for them is less. Then if that enables us to access reimbursement, it may be where we could say, hey, we're getting reimbursed for the vaccine. So that got the $4 grand and it only cost us $1 grand. I think understanding if that's an option is worthwhile, but if it's not, just doing our usual pathway for this year with the goal of aligning with the state for the next cycle and recognizing we may carry variance, so be it.
I just want to be clear that normally we would be reimbursed wholly for that $4,000, but because putting that requirement of color on it, it's.
I do wonder if like if Walpole VNA has the personnel, like again, I think we get good value from that contract from my standpoint.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
For them, then a lot of these barriers would be less. Where I suspect that they already have devices that this is a thing that they've done. So for them, it's just the man hours. Where for us, it's the whole infrastructure and the kit and caboodle.
Yes, I mean, I totally agree. It's worth looking into whether we can have someone do it and what that cost is.
Yeah.
But I think our fallback should probably still be we will hold the clinic the old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
If we can't find
Which,
someone.
given how stretched public health services are right now, it's not clear. I will mention Ellen has presented the issues of what it means to be a small town confronted by this short notice request. And we're hoping they're thinking about it and might come up with something that will be workable for us as well.
Yeah. But again, I would say like we have put yeoman, we've asked Ellen to do yeoman's work. And I think the idea
Yes.
that like, we got a switcheroo just seems ridiculous. So that's, Ellen, what are your reactions as if we land on something like that? Does that pass the guide check for you?
If we land on.
Saying that we'll find out what Walpole VNA can do. If they can do something and we have a better financial performance, then we'll pursue that. If we don't, then we'll pursue our usual flu clinic, recognizing that, you know, we may need to figure out where that 4,000 comes from, but we don't have a feasible alternative while satisfying the regulatory requirements for the Board of Health.
Oh, well, we know where the 4,000 comes from. It came from, it's already been paid because I have the vaccine. It came from the revolving fund, which we had the money. And we got that money from insurance reimbursements over the years. So there's still like $6,000 in that account, even after I spent the 4,000 to buy the vaccine now. We just might not get reimbursed for it this year.
Okay. I think that, I mean, my 2 cents is I think that like it's a question of competing priorities. I think the other things you're doing are a larger priority than rapid cycle adoption of a new software platform. Like, you know, and so I think we'd say if Walpole can do it, great. If they can't do it, do the usual routine, recognizing that 4,000 is spent.
Okay.
Given the constraints on Ellen's time, I'll mention one other, well, there are several other options, but another one. And that is, do we donate the vaccine to another municipality and not hold a flu clinic in Sherborn this year? Or is that something that we should not consider at all?
I'm sorry, I can't I can't give you a signal because I'm calling in from a car that I'm asking to speak, but I just would like to make a comment when it's okay.
Fire away, Rebecca.
I personally feel like we should hold a flu clinic because it's very valuable and it's useful and important, and especially if we've already paid for it, I don't really have a good public health argument not to hold it. I think it's really important that we do that for our community. That's my opinion.
Could we donate it to the Native Walpole visiting nurses and request that they vaccinate Sherborn residents with it?
Who requested?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like we're the Board of Health of Sherborn and we should do it. That's what we're supposed to be doing. I mean, that's almost one of our most important things that we do for the town.
I would say compared to other municipalities that hold flu clinics, what's important in those other communities, and this comes out at the MAHB conferences, is they have populations who don't have healthcare, adequate healthcare, or ready access to it. And I think we have a very different population in Sherborn on the whole. Now, there may be folks for
Well, I
whom
think
that's
we should
important, but I don't think it's the
definitely
majority.
donate the excess.
Well,
The
what-
excess after we hold our clinic should definitely be donated, absolutely, to communities with a need. But I don't see an argument that we shouldn't give it to our community because we have a lot of elderly people
So I
and
don't
young,
disagree.
immune suppressed people.
I don't disagree with the important, like, wildly enthusiastic about flu vaccine and vaccination. I think for me, the part that stands out is I sort of think about this set of tasks, and it kind of goes back to a conversation we had earlier about school, and like, there's lots of things we want to do, but sometimes we have to pick. And so like for things like minutes or variance hearings or other pieces, we have to do those things. And right now we've done those things with Ellen working overtime or Ellen working well in excess of the job description. And so if we can do the flu clinic in a way that allows Ellen to do all the other tasks that we've already put on her plate, and that the state has said this is a hard and fast requirement, and do the flu clinic the old fashioned way, great, I'm game. If we say that like this is coming out of Ellen needing to subsidize the town of Sherborn and doing this on top of an incredibly busy set of things, to me, this is a want, not a must. And I would say, while being enthusiastic about vaccination, I also want to be cognizant of the fact that, like, you know, I hear from Ellen 7 days a week about new cases, and you're working really hard to get caught up on minutes and do other things. And if something has to give, CVS won't do our minutes. CVS won't do the, you know, a well permit, and CVS will give a flu shot. And so I'd love to figure out, I like Daryl's idea of donating or partnering with Walpole VNA or something else to just, we need sort of time more than anything right now. You know, so that's sort of my gut reaction.
And it's, if it's good practice for pandemics, and the rest of the exercise at this time around, that's good.
Can
And
I
it's a
make one more
good thing,
comment?
but yeah, in just a second. And as Matt said, we have one staff person who bears the load of everything we're doing. And unless there are board members who can take over for that, I can't. I don't know what she knows of how to do that. Either we get some help in for her, or right, we need to lighten the load or spread it out for this time period, because it's been a grueling year and a half for Ellen, beyond grueling.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. I think Ellen, we're so incredibly lucky to have Ellen. She's wonderful. We're so lucky. But what I'm saying is if we can find a way to support her, that'd be great. Everybody, every town, you know, every state has the pandemic. So unfortunately, I just feel like we still have a responsibility to have the flu clinic. And if we can find a way to do that, that helps, you know, that doesn't overburden one person, I think I'm all for it. I was just saying that I think it would be great if we can find a way to do it. And obviously we should investigate ways to make it as painless as possible, and sharing the burden is a good idea. I just think we, as a Board of Health, should hold a flu clinic. That's all I'm saying.
So
And I don't
when-
care who does. I don't care if it's Sherborn.
So it
I don't care
sounds-
if VNA helps us. That would be great.
Yeah. So it sounds like we should wait to hear back from the Walpole VNA, and that would be potentially the best option. If that's financially viable
Yeah.
to have them just come in and run it, then they and administer the vaccine we already have, that would be best for everyone. Is that reasonable?
yeah, and then we might be talking about this again, perhaps at that, maybe we have to add something on the meeting of the 22nd, because when we say we need to research options. That's the royal we, that again falls on Ellen.
No,
And so it's another task for Ellen. So
I think we should like, my 2 cents is, I think, you know, so Rebecca had the conditional statement of like, if we can find a way to distribute it, I think that is desirable. I think for me, I would say, I think that's a call to Walpole VNA to say, hey, this new requirement made this so this is untenable. Is there a way that you can be involved to help support vaccination? If the answer to that is yes, donate vaccine to us, because usually we vaccinate, I'm trying to remember the numbers, at like 80 to 100.
Yeah, last year we did 210, I think.
210 for last year.
Yeah.
And so again, I think it's a bunch of people, but for the town of Sherborn, it's not the preponderance. And so again, I would say enthusiastic to do it, but I do think we need to really constrain it and say, I think this is a question to Walpole VNA. If they say, yes, we can help you, great. If they say, no, we can't help you, then I don't see a way that we can distribute Ellen's other tasks. And I think we're done, and we need to say, you know, we donate this to them without a proviso that this goes to Sherborn, because as Sherborn, we haven't, you know, we don't have enough resilience in the system to be able to do pandemic plus.
Okay, that sounds good to me. Right. I didn't want it to become a try the VNA. Oops, that's not possible.
Do that.
Find another, find
Right.
another, find another, because
Yeah,
Ellen has
agreed.
been researching it and they have not been saying, oh, yes, the state hasn't said we already have a program that you can plug into.
Yeah.
Or here's a group of people who you can avail yourselves of. So there's a limit.
So do you not want me to do a paper?
Well,
clinic?
so I guess my question for you, Ellen, is if you look and think about the sets of things we have, you know, for me, I don't have a good mental model for paper clinic starting September 15th for Ellen is X amount of work. Like, I don't have a mental model of like, is that 5 hours of work or is that 50 hours of work? And so that's part of what I sort of would look to you to kind of help us understand of like.
It's a lot of work. Well, during the whole discussion, I'm trying to think. It's a lot of work, most of it being collecting the paperwork, the registrations and the insurance paperwork ahead of time.
So what if we're not getting paid and we don't do that, does that make it much easier?
What was that?
Well, if we think we won't get paid anyway because we're not doing color, like
Yeah.
what happens if we just don't collect it?
Oh, if we just don't collect it and just give the.
Well, like, are we definitely not getting reimbursed if we don't have color?
Well, I haven't heard back. I had sent the email just the other day, just earlier this week. So I haven't heard back from Commonwealth Medicine about that yet. I'm still hopeful.
Yeah. So
but what I was wondering, Sue Kelleher did ask me, you know, if there's anything she can do to help. I could talk to her and see if they would make the appointments and collect the paperwork and give it to me, you know, whether it be weekly or.
Yeah. I think
That's a great idea.
Because well, I mean, I don't know if she'll do it, but, you know, I can ask. Because the other thing is from September 30th through October 9th, I'm on vacation and I'm out of state.
Perfect. Even better.
Yeah, no, but.
So here,
But that's the reason. That's the reason that you need help, and we can help. We will support the idea of getting somebody else to help you.
So I want to kind of put that as a phrase so Ellen can say, well, Matt Vitale, when in like a year when Jeff Waldron is like, wait, you guys spent all the revolving fund money on shots? You know, so what I would propose is, it sounds like our line one is to say if Walpole VNA can support it, that is a desirable outcome, particularly if the cost is less than our sunk cost of vaccine. If Walpole VNA can't do it, the second tier is to say, the person that Ellen has the email out with to say, can we get paid on paper? If we can get paid on paper, then having Sue Kelleher and that group help support registration and appointment making would be really helpful and would be sort of the condition to continue with it, because that's where we need to debulk Ellen so she can do her regulatorily required things in a sustainable way. If we find out that no matter what we don't get paid, then we're going to just say that sunk cost is sunk. We don't have a way to recoup it. We will administer the shots in a medically consistent way using the volunteers, but we're going to not work on the registration because we're not getting paid either way.
Okay,
I'm in favor of that. I support that.
we still need to collect the paperwork because we need to put it into MIIS.
Okay. And so we might still have to ask for, is that something Susan or her team could do, or does it have to be somebody's MIIS trained?
No, that would be easier than collecting the insurance information.
Does that have to be you because of how we interface with that MIIS?
Oh, yeah, Jean does the inputting into.
Okay, perfect. And I see Jeff's hands up.
Well, I was just gonna say, I'm wondering if there's a hybrid proposal, as if we weren't complicated enough. What about if we only did a clinic for seniors and only had the senior, higher dose vaccine?
Well, I accept that right now I have 50 high dose vaccines and 100 regular dose.
Regulars, because last year you did them separately because you did the seniors in town hall and a DPW for the others. It might be less work if we only did the seniors, and they might be, if I was going to sacrifice something, I would sacrifice the regular ones, perhaps. But I agree with everything that's been said. I wouldn't worry about the money, and I would do what's easiest for you to administer.
This is recorded, Jeff. He said, don't worry about the money.
Yes, but as Courtney wisely points out, I'm now on the select board, not on advisory anymore. You got to call Stephen. You got to call Stephen Tsai now. But I'm serious. I would do what's easiest for you.
Yeah, and that would be very helpful if we could do that.
Do just the seniors?
Yeah, the senior and even adults. I mean, once it gets into doing the children, it gets confusing. You have to keep the state vaccines separate. Right now, I don't have any.
I would love not doing the children because I feel weird every time I sign as the clinic, whatever it is that I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would make it simpler just to make it just, seniors. Maybe, I don't know what the senior is, maybe 60 and over instead of 65, but that would allow you to still have some service, but not an overwhelming volume, and would justify, maybe getting a refund of 50 vaccines or something, but not 150. I don't know what, but.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll be able to get,
a partial. Who knows? I wouldn't worry about the money though. And I will go to bat for that, Dr. Vitale.
Ellen, my hope from all of this is that there is 1,000 things we put on your plate. I think the goal here is to make sure we're doing it the best we can, so that you sort of look at this like, okay, my life got more manageable after today, not less. Do we feel on track for that?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, so in terms of, I just want to make sure I've got the hierarchy just to make sure that we're kind of collectively there. Goal number 1, have somebody else do it, whether or not that entails us getting our money back or not. Goal number 2 is us doing it with registration and insurance information, if that will result in money. If it won't result in money, then we will just do the registration required for MIIS entry. And in either of those cases, we will focus our vaccination efforts on adults only, with a particular targeted focus on seniors, with the goal of engaging Sue Kelleher to help support the effort. Do I have that all right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if there's no volunteers or anything else, we'll find somewhere to donate the vaccine.
Perfect. Any other thoughts or comments on the topic?
I can believe we'll be talking about this on the 22nd.
I'm not talking, I'm gonna have enough people yelling at me about vaccines.
Yeah.
Oh, true.
Yeah, but we can keep it as a tail at the back end, like a closer.
Yeah.
Chaser.
Yeah.
Do we want to do the second well discussion?
Yes, let me bring that up.
And Courtney, I agree. I think kids going through pediatricians makes sense. And Ellen, my sense is the pediatric volume is not usually super high. Is that right?
No, we usually get about maybe 60, 65 kids.
Yeah.
I only get 60 doses from the state.
Okay. Perfect. So we've got good next steps. And then Ellen, as always, if you need me to sign something, just let me know. If it's got a routing number and account number on it, I'm not signing it, but otherwise I'm good. So maybe,
Okay.
well, Daryl, you got it?
Yeah, I hope you're seeing the slides that you had prepared. So Matt put together,
Right now, I'm still just seeing the agenda.
really, it says I'm screen sharing. Oh, now I know why it's doing that. All right, hold on. It's because that was up in PowerPoint. Okay.
And so I can kind of bring in some background for the topic. I mean, I think it's familiar to all of us, but we'd had the first applicant for the second well and kind of went through that process and had some, some things that just came up because we'd never done it before. And my hope was to put something together that we could say, hey, this is how we're thinking about it. These are the things, this is the workflow we'd like to see, so we can communicate that to Mark and share it with applicants. So when they say, what's the process or whatever, here's what it is. So in the introductory slides, I included just the different requirements as it related to wells. So this was section 10.1, which is the well setback. The definition of wells, just again, my mental image is that we would be able to have a deck or something like it that we could say, this is for Mark. And then if somebody were in the situation, we could say, here's the background information, and just email the deck to them or a PDF or whatever. So this is just the background regulation. There's the domestic water supply. This is all kind of old. The well protection, again, this is a general, I really just tried to go through the regulations to pull out everything that was about well and wellness. In this one, if we go back to slide 4, there's one difference with the distance to an adjacent well, that the irrigation wells already have a requirement for a 100-foot distance from any adjacent well, as opposed to the domestic water supply, which is 75 feet. So it's clear that our existing regulations also prioritize residential use over irrigation, given that we have an additional setback that's required for an irrigation well from another household's piece. And that was before our interval regulation. I think slide 5. So I'm good here. I just wanted to highlight that. And then this is just our regulation that we had introduced. I can't remember when, 2019, 2018, something.
Yeah, I don't remember. 2019, I think.
I believe you're right, 2019.
Yep. And so this was what I tried to use as the basis for what we'd want. So at the time we said that people sort of need to make an application to the board. And so then I tried to use the regulation to sort of inform it. So the regulation, just to take a second, because Matt, you didn't have the pleasure of this cycle of things where we talked about the great cesspool debate of 2019, or the great vaping discussion of 2019 and ledge disruption. But so the background for this was, particularly in that period, we had just come out of a cycle of drought where we saw several areas and several properties downtown that had issues with well performance. And I think Daryl, Ellen, and Mark certainly know more than I. Like, it sounds like that history, particularly the downtown area, has extended back for a number of years, but that we've had other patterns of use. And so for this one, we said, we want to make sure that when people say, no, it's fine, I'm going to just use it for irrigation, the idea is that we'd want a homeowner to not install a well for the purposes of irrigation, particularly if it may impact their neighbor's water supply, not their own, that kind of philosophical question. So multiple lots associated with one business or residence shall be considered a single property. For the purposes of this requirement, installation of wells to supply a multi-dwelling project, property zoned, assessed, and operated as a commercial agricultural land, or another need not specified, shall require the submittal of an application. So everybody's got to set an application. And no well should be used to supply more than one dwelling unless permitted as a public water supply. So I think you can go to slide 6, Daryl. And so this is then in the meat of what I want to see from the applicant. And this is kind of me spitballing. I'd really call this a draft document and welcome the input of others. I guess the first is I should have done 1, 2, 3, not AA. I mean, that's just poor bullet form. But the applicant should specify the project character and define whether it's a multi-dwelling project, agricultural land, or other use. So I think in the case of the applicant who subsequently withdrew, saying this is irrigation for a commercial hemp field would be the sort of level of detail you'd want, or, you know, we're doing this and we're going to do this next. I know that we've had instances in the past, and I may be wrong, but I think it was 54 North Main, where people kind of get cute with the well applications, where they're like, here's the well that I'm proposing for this subdivision of 4 houses. It's also the exact well location should I decide to do a 40B that's got, you know, DECA. Since what we're talking about is volume of use, I think we need to be able to say to an applicant, you really need to be specific about what your actual plan is. And this is conditional to it being substantially related to that plan. And so defining the plan pattern of use, I think that for those like the irrigation uses, being able to describe the specified, being able to specify anticipated patterns of use would be required for the board to reach the conclusion that it would be reasonably likely to not interfere with an abutting well. So I don't think that an engineer just asserting on a set of plans, hey, I promise it'll be fine, is enough. I think we'd want to be able to say, hey, your irrigation plan is going to use 10,000 gallons a day. That's like 40 houses. We can't just say that that's not going to be a problem. We need to think more about that. And so for that, if you're talking about a residential or regular use, I think you'd say, you know, the daily use is X gallons per day or whatever. But if you're talking about irrigation, being specific about, we anticipate that this will be in use 3 days a week for 5 hours at a time to do pressure tanks. Like, I think we'd want that specificity, because I don't see how we could satisfy the standard of not interfering with an abutters well without that information. And I know for that initial applicant, it was just I think it was the engineer, the well driller, that said, we've satisfied all the setbacks, thus that's proof that it won't interfere with the neighbor's use. And for me, if I were a neighbor, that would pass the gut check. You know, why have the regulation if meeting the status setbacks demonstrated the coverage? Like, you wouldn't need to add, there'd be no benefit to the regulation. So, and then the applicant needs to satisfy all SAS and setback issues related for the well. So that goes to the distance to the property line, distance to SAS. And so just to say that a second well, to make clear to an applicant, a second well has no fewer requirements than the first well, and for irrigation, as we saw above, may have more. And so, you know, for me, the other question of like, how do we define abutters? Or again, what information would we want to consistently have when considering a plan so that we'd have a reasonably complete mental picture? You know, for me, I felt like wells within 200 feet helps. But again, if we had something where somebody says, I'm going to be pumping out 1,000 gallons a day from this, you might say, boy, that 200 feet is really designed for a typical pattern of residential flow that's like 500 gallons a day. Or, you know, if they say we're going to pump, you know, 1,000 gallons an hour, or what, I mean, whatever the number is, if it's bonkers, we might have a larger catchment that we'd want to define in terms of knowing where the wells are to make sure that those abutting properties had reasonable chance to discuss. And again, to me, part of that was thinking a little bit about the abutting properties for a, you know, like when we did the 54 North Main or those discussions, you know, having a big point rock was kind of the scenario I was thinking about, although that wouldn't apply because it's a public water supply, so we wouldn't be the approver for that test, but for having a regulatory base to say, hey, you know, here's a pattern notification. So I'm not sure that I've got the right part on D. I certainly would want to know it within 200 feet, but I also think that having some kicker, if you've got a pattern that makes it say your pattern of use is not like a household, that that should be a larger radius or all abutters or some other definition. Since property lines are relatively arbitrary, then I would favor doing 400 feet, but I don't have a great sense from an engineer's perspective about how onerous that task would be as you sort of double the radius of the circle. And then also just the idea that part B and D are necessary but not sufficient, and that we may recommend that there's some use patterns that would require offering a drawdown. And Matt, I think this is before you're on the board, and I don't know if we've discussed it, but basically what they do is they put they have a drawdown test where the drilled well that is now kind of being piloted for use is run with some pre-specified fashion, and there's a sensor that's placed in the abutters well that uses a laser to determine the water level changes associated with it. And so we did that for the ZBA approval, I think, for 54 North Main. And my recollection is that the cost for that is on the order of hundreds of dollars, not thousands of dollars. And so if we did have, again, irrigation use or something else as a big point draw, that would be something that we may consider. So just satisfying B and D doesn't mean that it's automatically yes, but that's the information that we need to know, do we need to do more? And also that they then provide the information they share with us with the abutters. So let me pause there.
I mean, I think I like the general, I also struggle with D and would want sort of more specialist input on sort of what the right range is there. I like the general principle that, if there's something beyond a typical household use, that we have like an out to sort of examine that individually. I think if we sort of view the whole goal here as like protecting sort of access to primary groundwater wells on neighbors, we need to like make sure this is written in such a way that we have an opportunity to intervene and we don't just like sort of create a loophole that lets someone pump thousands of gallons a day out because they sort of met all the numbers. So I think this is constructed well to manage that. That's really my only thought.
Yeah, I think some of the things in D, it'll be hard to specify that because how big is your bedrock fracture? How many are there? Where does it connect to? But that's something that we'll never really know for sure. But that monitoring is one approach, but that means that they've already installed the well by the time you get to monitor neighbors' wells of what a drawdown test would be, or pump test. So yes, tricky. And I'd also like to go back. There was something in the regulation that talked about justification for the well. And for example, why I'd want to hear why the existing well is insufficient.
That I like that. Yeah, I think we should.
Yeah, that's good.
Yep. I think I would put that under, like, I might add another bullet between B and C to sort of say, rationale for why existing water resources are inadequate.
And also, I'd add to that, have alternatives been considered? Like if it's for irrigation that they are seeking this, have they looked at rainwater harvesting, drip irrigation, dry scaping, replacing the current well with a better well, whether that's deeper, bigger, something, and still keeping it to one for the other reasons that we've talked about on why one is simpler than multiple. Also, water. Yeah, go ahead.
So the way I want to put, I'm just taking notes and I'll work on updating this, but I think what you're saying is what alternatives have been considered. And we want the applicant to articulate that. And again, that's for us and then also for the abutter, who I think we're saying, this is what I'd want to know. Sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure I got that right.
Yeah, it's a request, and there's some other regulations that do this where you want the applicant to have done the proper planning and homework before pursuing something that may or may not be truly necessary. Something else, but we'd have to probably consider this maybe as a regulatory change is, if it is for irrigation, what is the plan going to be for water use when there's a drought, when we want to prioritize essential needs of water? Because that's the part I always find funny about irrigation wells is people put up the little signs on lawns saying, hey, it's okay, I'm not following the watering restrictions because
I'm just tapping it myself.
So as if it's coming from a magical little isolated pool of water that has nothing to do with anybody else, part of a wide area resource.
So maybe we could add that under what alternatives have been considered, and do you have any use mitigation plans that can be implemented in cases of drought?
Yeah, that gets right. Or to know that for irrigate, if it turns out to be an irrigation well, it gets a little tricky when it's for food. I don't even know in terms of justification if I would approve an irrigation well merely for landscaping. But
I mean,
that's for down the line, but hard to guess what we might be seeing. So anyway, those are some of the things, and I could send you my notes just if you don't want to.
Oh yeah, that I think that would be awesome. And I think, like, for me, philosophically, what I was trying to do with this is, I know one of the things that was frustrating for the applicant was who's like, well, like, I didn't know you wanted this. And so I think the goal for this is to say, applicant, this is all the stuff that we think in most use cases we'll want to know. It may be that they'll say, I'm setting up a water slide park. And, I mean, there could be some wacky stuff. So it doesn't mean I'll cover everybody. But if we get like 85% of what we want for most people most of the time, that feels good. And this isn't saying if you do this, it's a guarantee. It's really just saying this is the stuff we think we'll always want to know.
Yeah. Right. Are you planning to bottle water and sell it?
Yeah.
Come down.
Augusto Brook water just doesn't have the ring that's going to run off the shelves. I feel like you lose me at Bog. And then can you go to slide 7? Because I think I had other.
Yes, you did.
Do I have other questions there? And then I think other parameters, just that they do have to they're required to satisfy potability and testing, given that a future pattern of use may change. The recommendation that they provide to a butter, and variance request to section 7 is required with associated variance request letter and a variance fee of $100, but does not require formal hearing or formal abutter notification. And this was based on, I kind of reached out to Ellen to get a sense from her, but I think our intent here is to follow other patterns so that somebody wouldn't necessarily have to have the X number of days notification, but there does need to be a variance associated with it. And then I think, I don't know that we need to specify this. I think based on the discussion tonight, it probably makes sense to kind of keep what we've described here general, because I think that the use cases for specific patterns are probably so specific that specifying it in the kind of catch-all guidance doesn't make sense. Okay. So I think what I wanted to flag here was just residential use has a specific yield requirement, which says, like for Title V, and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 110 gallons a day.
Correct. And sometimes the national standard's 150, but it is 110 in Massachusetts per day per bedroom.
And so it's basically the well yield is saying, boy, you need to have more, you need to get more out of the faucet than you're able to flush. I suppose to give resilience to say if you're going to lose water, it's a problem. Semi-public water supplies must be adequate to meet projected needs. And so for me, it just left open the question of like, what's the right performance requirement for well use other than a single residential system? So for example, for the commercial hemp farm, would the board specify this is the yield that you need to meet to satisfy the requirements? I think you'd have to, what I would suggest is that the yield should always meet residential use, since we're treating this as a potential future residential well in the rest of the regulation. It makes sense to say it should meet that performance standard, since it's possible someone in the future will want or need that. But I don't feel super strongly about it. It makes sense to me. But you know, if we've got a weird, funky pattern of use, you know, I think that we have to revisit that case by case, and probably don't need to put it in this deck. Does that sound right to folks?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think some of these things are harder, and they are covered by, you know, other things to reference, I think.
Okay.
And depending on the use of the irrigation well, you may want to have them do an aquifer review to see if they're in an aquifer that will provide plenty of water, or if it's an area that may not, and it could affect the abutters. The other thing I was going to suggest is, I think it's maybe best to say require a butter notification. I think it's very important with irrigation wells that the abutters know there could be a drawdown on their well, and that's a potential issue that they should know about in advance.
And so would that mean we'd have to get green cards back before we could consider it?
That, and maybe they show proof that they, well, I think that would be the best bet, that the abutters know. So especially when it could be affecting their properties, their
But if-
wells on their properties.
If that's not in the regulations now,
No, I understand. It would have to be something. Yeah.
wouldn't that require a change to the reg?
Yeah, I think some of these, including who designs the plan, should be on our next regulation review.
Okay.
You know,
So
'cause
maybe
it-
that's a future bullet. When Ellen gets free time again, then we can re-tackle vaping. Or maybe when Ellen gets free time again, she'll be like, "See ya." So let's have that as a future to do. But I think this makes sense.
I also like that you know, pulled out all these pieces that tie in. So I think that's good.
So I will work on, Daryl, if you'll send me your notes, I'll work on getting a final version for this. And then Ellen and Mark, I'd love to send it for your entirely non-urgent review, to just kind of see if anything stands out with kind of your respective lenses. And then I think we can just keep it in the file. So if people are doing an additional one, we can say, hey, this was discussed by the board. These are some sort of guiding principles to hopefully help you have a successful, fully informed application. Ellen, I guess one question I have from an open meeting standpoint, I know this is a topic that Lisa had been interested in, but she can't join tonight. Is it permissible for me to follow up with her to just see if she has any additional feedback, or like, what's the best way to get any feedback from her into the regs?
Yeah, I mean, you can talk to her, but as far as formal feedback.
So I can check in with her, but if we're having any substantive change, we need to come back to an open meeting. Okay, I think that sounds fine. And so I can circulate to her and then just say, hey, if you've got substantive edits to this, let's just add it as an agenda item on the next meeting.
Right.
Okay, I think that sounds great. But does this kind of line up with what people thought would be helpful?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
Thank you very much. I think that's great.
Awesome. Thanks, Rebecca. And Matt, I appreciate you not judging me for the like very poor bullet hygiene.
I'm doing it silently, Matt. It's okay.
I'll take it. Perfect. All right, Daryl, what do we got?
We have ARPA funds discussion. So just to remind folks that the monies that the town has can be used for public health related issues. The Groundwater Protection Committee is probably going to seek monies to support their further analysis of wells in town by trying to better plot wells on GIS maps.
That sounds awesome. I love
Yeah.
that idea.
So that's been on the Groundwater Protection Committee's list since the early 2000s. So we collected all the well data, but then realized that we couldn't really peg it. Mostly at that time, they want it for different reasons, I think now, but we wanted to put it, to know what elevation it was at so that we could map the surface of groundwater underground better and know what the, I don't know if anyone's done that before. I mean, I've had to look at that for when you look at contaminated sites, that's what you try and get an understanding of, is where the water's flowing. So you can figure out what the slope of the groundwater is underground. But you have to know, if you're measuring 10 feet down in one place and 15 feet down, what's the elevation above sea level that you're starting at for each of those measurements. And that's what we don't have at all. So anyway, so they're considering having some interns or something come in to do that work. So they may be applying, and that'll help us understand groundwater conditions better. So that's good.
Is there anything applicable for like the cyanobacteria or the goose poop at Farm Pond?
There might be, and I wish, yeah, that would be with Farm Pond Committee, but that would be probably be another good place to put it. And then
Just for like big community impact.
Yeah. And then for Board of Health, Ellen had a fabulous idea, because we've been trying to figure out ways.
Are we getting a dog?
Yeah. That could be a nice addition too. Sure. But that, I don't think that's going to offload as much work from Ellen as maybe what she came up with, but maybe both would work. Dog, fish, cat, who knows, ferret. Is, again, a lot of what Ellen does, she knows so much. We do, we'd need to train people a lot to be able to take over some of the things she does. However, she's identified that a public health nurse, and Ellen, maybe you should even describe it because you'll do it more justice, whether we look to get a part-time employee who is a nurse, who can then take it away, Ellen.
Okay, they could, annually, they could plan and run the flu clinic. That would take that away from me, which I would love. They could handle emergency preparedness during the rest of the year. They could go to those meetings. They could update the plans that I'm supposed to update quarterly, and I don't think I've touched in 5 years. And they could do MAVEN. They could do the communicable disease follow-up. We could not need to have the Walpole VNA contract if we had a nurse on staff. And that would be a huge help. There is plenty of work for a part-time nurse in town.
What's the time cadence? Like, how long do the ARPA funds cover?
2025.
Oh yeah, that seems promising.
Yeah.
And also we need more staff anyway, because as we've said, it's been a lot of years that the Board of Health has operated with the same staffing level, and yet the demands have gone up every year. So it's kind of a miracle that things work as well as they do.
Well, they work well, except all I see is everything piling up and everything is not in good shape because I don't have time to do it.
Yeah, right, especially lately. And things are in good shape because Ellen has developed such good systems for things. So thank goodness for that.
And then I see Courtney's got her hand up.
Yes.
Hi, this
Hi,
is
Courtney.
actually Steve.
Oh.
Because I heard you talking about ARPA funds, so I know Courtney's laughing at me now. But
I feel like we've been duped.
Told him he had to pick a different flower whenever he talked.
It's like I want Stephen the Stormtrooper.
I'll go log in as myself. And Jeff, you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but what you just described with having like a part-time public health nurse, I don't think that the ARPA, I don't think something like that would be eligible for ARPA funding, because you can't use it to cover the cost of what would normally be sort of considered like normal operating cost or salary, unless it was like, you know, lost revenue that you could attribute to COVID. You know, if
we paid overtime, Steve, like when we had for a number of departments, including Ellen, but including the town clerk, we paid because there was extenuating circumstances like the town clerk running elections with COVID measures, we paid overtime.
Yeah, and I think that's fine, and maybe I'm misunderstanding
that was
the
CARES
proposal.
Act, CARES and not ARPA though, too.
Yeah,
I'm not-
ARPA is to strengthen public health services.
But I don't, maybe I'm misunderstanding the proposal for this part-time nurse, but are you proposing that you establish a new sort of employed position in town, or is this like a temporary thing that you're just using during the pandemic?
It could be a permanent, but maybe we could reterm it, redefine it.
Yeah, because I think that's if you're proposing that you are going to establish a new permanent position, I don't believe that the ARPA funding would be, I don't know that that would be allowed under the ARPA guidelines. Again, I'm not 100% sure, but generally speaking, it's to sort of cover COVID-related expenses or shortfalls, and then for sort of discrete projects that would fall under, you know, various approved categories. And so I don't know that establishing a new employed position would qualify as sort of a discrete project, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think he's right. And also, if I'm right about the date, which I thought you were going to correct me on that too. I thought it was through 2025, but then you would still have the problem of them running out 2 years from now if you decided it was a new position.
Yeah, I know that the timing, we have to use it in 3 years.
Yeah.
So I you know, if by 2025 you mean by the end of 2024, I think that's correct.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
We'd have to check, but
yeah, we could make it a temporary position, and then in the long term, since it may be needed, then the town could just decide to adopt that.
We're also paying a VNA, so I mean, it's also maybe just transferring some money from consulting services to salaries.
So I guess it sounds like I feel like in the sort of acute period, it's going to be hard to really think some of this through unless we think that ARPA allows a bridge to kind of help Ellen deal with some of the, because we sort of have the combined COVID pandemic and then the exodus to the suburbs, which is leading to the hottest real estate market in Sherborn in 50 years. And sort of all the associated upgrades as people just had poo puddles in their backyards and now they're selling, and, you know, we sort of have the high project volume. And so being able to take the public health related chunks of that backlog off, even if it's in the next 6 to 12 months, would be appealing. So I guess what are our next steps? It sounds like there's a little bit where, you know, it may make sense for us or a subset of us on the board to kind of think this through. And then who's our ARPA expert if we wanted to say, hey, is this allowed or not allowed? Is it advisory? Is it David? Like who's the...
They sent an email out today to everybody in town. Maybe it went to Daryl. I didn't look at the distribution, but
I didn't get it, I don't think.
It only just came out a couple hours ago, so.
Oh, yeah. All right. Then maybe I did get it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you did. The process is that the projects or funding requests will be reviewed by advisory first. And then, because the approving body is the select board, but that's advisory's role, is to sort of evaluate and make sure that the cost estimates are accurate and they've got either state bidding lists or 3 bids or all that kind of stuff to justify the expense. And part of the reason is it's not unlimited money. I think you can correct me, Steve, but I think we have like in the neighborhood $1.2 million to use over 3 years or 2.5 years. So we don't necessarily want to spend it all right away if there might be a project a year from now that we would prefer to do. So I think we probably want to use some, some discretion in terms of what we approve.
And that's the email that went out also. So there's a sort of like pre-approval process before an official thing comes to advisory. Essentially you just tell the finance director and she'll take a look at it, and she has a consultant who also sort of pre-assesses all of the requests and make sure that she thinks that this type of thing would be allowed under ARPA. But furthermore, one of the things that we're asking for as sort of as advisory in an attempt to plan out the use of the money over 3 years is even informally, if you have an idea that's like, oh, maybe we want to do something like this. I don't know if that's okay or not. Like, just contact the finance director and let her know, oh, you're thinking of maybe doing this kind of a project, and maybe it would happen a year from now, 2 years from now, and just ballpark estimate of how much money you think it would cost. And we're trying to get that from all of the different departments so that we can start getting a feel for who is going to be planning on making a request. And then we can sort of weigh, official requests against our kind of like future planning, if that makes sense. So if you're like, oh, maybe we want to do this thing with a public health nurse, like just go ahead and kind of do some back of the napkin numbers and then contact the finance director and say, hey, we thought maybe we could do this. Is that a thing that ARPA could be used for? Just go ahead and contact her.
That
Okay.
was super helpful. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And is anyone on the board interested in working on that?
For me, it depends a little bit on timeline. We've got some sort of up in the air stuff that we'll know a lot more for kind of on the family side in the next month. So if this is like, boy, we really need to get this figured out ASAP, I probably don't have bandwidth. If it's a longer time cycle, I'd be happy to be involved.
I'm sort of the same. Short term, I've got a lot of commitments, but if this is, a couple months out, that might be more flexible.
Okay.
It may link naturally with your budget process, which, technically due by end of the year,
Mhm.
but generally roll into the first few months of next year. So it could be something that you do when you're looking at your budget.
I can talk to Alyssa if you want, because I do talk to her pretty regularly about estimated costs for a nurse. I don't know what they go for. I know the visiting nurses charge us $55 an hour.
Okay, well, yeah, might be awkward. I don't know. Is that an odd question to ask our current?
I think you could ask
vendor?
a general question in terms of, is there a general salary range that is typical for people doing this kind of work?
Yeah, no, I don't think she would mind at all.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. So, all right, and then maybe at some point we'll find out what more of the restrictions are. Steve, as long as you're there, did you hear the idea about using monies for looking at the health of farm pond vis-a-vis bacteria and the cyanobacteria?
Yeah,
Nicole?
I would assume that stuff like that would be covered because it is, you know, I think public water supply and sort of public water supply protection is one of the categories that ARPA is looking at. So I do think that that type of thing should be allowed. But again,
Okay.
anything you come up with that you're like, oh, maybe this is a crazy idea, just go ahead and throw it out there to the finance director. And you know, I'd rather have more ideas than fewer. You know, so that when inevitably somebody just shows up with a request for $500,000 for some harebrained idea, if we have an idea that, oh no, we have better ways to use that $500,000, you know, it helps to know if people have ideas brewing down the pipeline. So
All right. Okay. I'll reach out to Farm Pond Advisory on that.
I don't want to
Okay.
jinx this, but I think we're in good shape.
Yep.
Do we just need to get to agenda?
Yeah. I think we've done everything.
Yep. So I think for agenda, can we include data review for the mask again? So I think we want to have that on a kind of regular basis.
That'll get your audience up above 8, I think.
We'll see. You know, either way, I'm a happy man. And then we'll probably have, I don't know if we'll have more, I guess the kind of key topics for school will talk about the special meeting on the 22nd, so don't meet on the 29th. Nothing else comes to mind for me.
Flu clinic again on the 29th.
Oh yeah, I love it.
If there's anything you want to announce to the town, sort of like if you meet it's next Wednesday, I think you said, for the special Dover joint meeting.
Yep.
We have a select board. That
Oh, Rebecca, are you available 7 p.m. September 22nd?
Yes.
Perfect. So we're going to have a special meeting with the Dover Board of Health with the topic of discussion being kind of role for mandatory vaccination for faculty and staff at DS.
Okay. Is there anything to review before that meeting?
There's not. I think that the district is working on compiling vaccine rates for the district, which I think should be available by then. But nothing else to review. I may, if I can come up, there's just a good New England Journal article paper on the sort of relative rates of adverse events that I found really, like, I'm not sure I totally get the study design, but like it seemed reasonable, that I may circulate.
Which one is it? Which month?
It was the September 16th edition, so I think the most recent New England Journal. There's safety data out of Israel that compared sort of prevalence of side effects within 6 weeks of vaccination for people who are vaccinated compared to unvaccinated, but also COVID compared to vaccinated, which I think is a really helpful comparison in this environment. So I'll try to get a digital copy of that to circulate to the group beforehand. And then I'll have a couple of other articles that I probably circulate in advance of that as well, but we'll include it as the materials for that.
Okay.
And where I was going is, if you do make some kind of a noteworthy decision next Wednesday, we could announce it at the select board the following night.
Yeah, I suspect, you know, again, because the scope is confined to the district, I think that whatever we arrive at will still then need to be implemented with the bargaining unit and the district and those pieces. And so I think it'll probably come through via school committees. They've got a school committee date for the 28th. So they've got one on the 21st, which we felt like with the holiday Friday and everything else would be tight. And so for the 28th, I think they're kind of holding a slot with whatever we come up with on the 22nd.
Is there any thinking that DESI might come out with any kind of policy in this regard, or will we be?
I think that we continue to hope that, and if we learn anything from masks right after everybody yells at us, like the next day, DESI will say, yep, we've got a plan. So maybe we'll help spark the plan.
Okay, well said.
Perfect. I think that's all I got.
So ready to adjourn, everyone?
Oh, yeah.
I think so.
Okay, we are adjourned.
Good night.